In the mountain valley of Tarloon, the air was always filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. Yet people rarely ventured beyond the safety of the village walls. Strange sounds echoed from the forest, deep footsteps, tree trunks groaning, and the occasional thundering sigh. Most villagers whispered the same name when those sounds reached their ears. The ragged giant girl. She had been seen only a handful of times, towering above the treetops, wearing clothes so torn and weather-beaten that they barely clung to her. No one knew where she came from, and no one dared to find out. Children were warned not to wander, and adults closed their windows early, all because of a figure who had never once lifted a hand against them. Aaron, a young tailor's apprentice, had always doubted the stories. He believed fear made people exaggerate, and he preferred the truth over rumors. One morning, while gathering herbs near the riverbank, he discovered enormous footprints, pressed into the mud, each one larger than a dining table. Instead of running, curiosity tugged at him. He followed the trail through tall grass and under low-hanging branches until the prints led to a broken wooden bridge. The planks were scattered, and at the edge of the river sat the giant girl herself. She wasn't roaring or smashing anything. She was crying quietly, but each tear splashed like a small bucket hitting the ground. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her ragged clothes hanging in long strips. Her hair, tangled like forest vines, fell over her face. Aaron stepped forward slowly, making sure she saw him before he got too close. Her head lifted, and her eyes widened in surprise, not anger. "You're not here to chase me away?" she asked, her voice deep yet trembling. "No," Aaron said, trying to keep his knees from shaking. "You look like you need help." She told him her name, Sira, and how long she had lived alone in the forest. She wasn't hiding because she wanted to scare people, but because she believed her ragged appearance made her unwanted. Whenever she tried to approach the village, people panicked, so she stayed away. Aaron listened carefully, and when she finished, he looked at her clothes with a tailor's instinct. "You deserve something better than this," he said. "I'll sew you a new dress, one that fits who you really are." Sierra shook her head, unsure whether to believe him, but Aaron was already planning how many rolls of fabric he'd need. He left with a determined smile, promising to return, and for the first time in years, Sierra felt a small spark of hope. Aaron's promise hung in Sierra's mind for days, bright and impossible, like a star too close to touch. He returned each morning with bundles of thick white cloth, piled onto a squeaky wooden cart. The villagers stared at him as he worked in the clearing beneath a massive oak tree, though few were brave enough to approach. Some muttered that he was foolish, others that he was inviting danger, but Aaron ignored them all. He set up needles thicker than knitting pins, coated thread in beeswax so it wouldn't tear, and spent hours stitching pieces together. Even with all his tools and skill, each part of the dress looked tiny in his hands, yet enormous once it was lifted and spread across the grass. Sierra watched him from behind distant boulders or high tree canopies, always careful not to snap branches or step on wildflowers. She didn't want to startle him or ruin his work. She had lived so long in the shadows that coming too close felt wrong, as if she might break something delicate just by breathing near it. But Aaron always called out to her when he sensed she was nearby, telling her about his day, about a stubborn needle, or about how he wished he had brought a larger pair of scissors. His chatter made her laugh softly, though her laughter rolled like distant thunder. News of the giant girl's sightings spread beyond, to loon faster than Aaron's stitches. Clans from neighboring regions, Falwyn, Red March, and Stonecrest, sent warriors to investigate, believing a threat had awakened. Riders in armor stormed the roads, scouts climbed trees, and archers lined the cliffs. None of them expected what they found: a young tailor sewing the largest white dress the valley had ever seen. When the warriors confronted Aaron, demanding to know where the creature was hiding, he didn't flinch. He stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead, and told them plainly there was no enemy here. "The only thing frightening is how fast rumors spread," he said, pointing at the half-finished dress that shimmered gently in the wind. The warriors exchanged confused looks, unsure whether he was brave or foolish. Then Sira stepped out of the forest. The ground trembled under her feet, and birds fled from the branches above. The warriors reached for their weapons, but Sira held up her hands in a peaceful gesture. Her voice shook as she spoke, but her words were steady. "I do not wish to harm anyone." Her honesty, paired with Iran's quiet determination, left the warriors stunned. For the first time, they saw her not as a monster, but as someone who had simply been alone too long. And as Sira gazed at the growing white dress, she began to believe that the world might finally see her differently too. When the dress was finally complete, it lay across the valley meadow like a fallen piece of moonlight. Iran stood beside it with aching fingers and a proud grin, brushing stray bits of thread from the fabric. It had taken countless days, more cloth than any village had ever seen, and patience that surprised even him. But when he looked at the finished creation, he felt none of the exhaustion, only hope that Sira would see herself the way he did, someone worthy of being welcomed, not feared. Sira approached cautiously from the tree line, each footstep sending soft vibrations through the ground. She had never worn anything new in her life. Everything she owned had been patched together from scraps she found in abandoned barns or tangled up in branches. When she saw the dress stretched before her, her breath caught. It was simple but beautiful, long, flowing, bright without being blinding. She knelt as carefully as she could, afraid even now that she might tear it with a careless movement. Aaron guided her through the process of trying it on. He held the edges, giving instructions, while Sira lifted the fabric gently, as if it were made of spider silk. Once she stood up fully, the dress shifted around her like a soft white waterfall. She looked down at herself, stunned, and for a moment, she forgot the years she had spent hiding among shadows and broken branches. Word of her appearance spread quickly. The warriors who had come expecting a battle watched in silence as she walked out into the open field dressed in white. Some lowered their weapons out of respect, others out of pure disbelief. The villagers followed, hesitant at first, then slowly gathering in a larger and larger crowd. It felt like the entire valley had come to witness something none of them had expected. Not a confrontation, but a moment of welcome. The Great Valley Assembly was meant to unite all the clans each year. And this time Sira was invited to stand at the center. Some people called it a wedding, not because anyone was being married, but because it felt like a joining, a bonding between someone who had lived apart and the community that was finally ready to accept her. Musicians played drums that echoed across the hills, and children ran forward holding small lanterns shaped like stars. Aaron stood beside Sira, not as a groom, but as a friend who had seen her humanity long before anyone else dared to. As the celebration filled the valley with light and laughter, Sira felt something she had never expected to feel again, a place where she belonged.